Hello, my name is Kirk. I use they, them pronouns, and today I'm going to be talking a little bit about trans imposter syndrome. You all know that. You saw the title of the video. But what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is this term that people use to talk about the feeling of feeling like an imposter, even if you're not. A feeling like if you're super qualified at your job, if you are really incredible, like let's say storyboard animation artist, you've done it all. You're very good at what you do, but you have this feeling like I'm just faking it. I'm just going through my life. I'm just like pretending. Like people are gonna find out. People are gonna realize that I'm just faking it. I'm not actually the expert that people take me for. That is imposter syndrome. It's a fake. It's like it's your brain telling you this information, telling you you're not good enough, telling you that you don't deserve to have the success or to have whatever you think you don't deserve. And what is trans? Let's do a trans 101 thing too, just to ground ourselves. I know you probably all have this idea that you know what being trans means or what transgender is, but being trans literally means identifying with a gender other than the gender that you were assigned at birth. I say this and I wanna ground us in what trans means, because a friend of a friend was telling me about a non-binary person who did not identify as trans. And for me, it's like, in the literal sense of the word, if you are non-binary, you are trans because you were not assigned non-binary at birth. So it's just like in the literal definition, trans people are people who identify as a gender other than the gender that they were assigned at birth. So trans imposter syndrome is sort of this idea, this doubt that I've heard come up a lot when I've talked to people, doubting whether they're really trans, doubting whether you are trans enough to be trans. This is a really common doubt. I don't think I've talked to a single non-binary person who hasn't expressed this doubt in one way or another. But a lot of people don't know that. A lot of like especially young trans people who are just coming into understanding their gender identity don't know that there is that doubt there. They don't know that that everybody struggles with that doubt. You know, there's not a single person in the world who is just like, you know what, I'm fucking trans, and never has a doubt in their life. That just doesn't happen. You grow into yourself. You grow into your identity, and identity is something that changes too, especially with the relationship to gender. Gender is like, your relationship to gender is fluid. No matter who you are, even cis people have a fluid relationship to their gender. But I wanted to talk about this because this is something that I've definitely had some experience in, and I know that it's something that a lot of people are concerned about, or like worry about these doubts. And so especially when I was first identifying as non-binary, I came out as non-binary a little over 2 years ago. And the first like 3 or 4 months, I was like constantly doing cycles in my head, like, oh, am I really non-binary? Is this just like, maybe I just like want attention, like what fucking shitty cis people say? And I would go back and forth, but it's like I would always land safely in the realm of, you know what, I am non-binary. I for so long in my life, I felt like being called he or him didn't fit. Being like, I never really ascribed to being a man either. But it's not always clear cut like that. It's like sometimes there's no sign from a higher power that's going to come down and tell you definitively that you are trans, that you are non-binary. You sort of have to figure that out for yourself and live with it for yourself. I've gotten since I started this channel, I've gotten a few messages about this, sort of like along the lines of like, oh, like, I don't know, like I've never really felt like X gender that I was assigned at birth. I've always, you know, I didn't really feel like a man or a woman. I don't know. But like, am I non-binary? Like, is it okay for me to use they them pronouns? And my response to that concern is like, yes, it's okay for you to use they them pronouns. Please use they them pronouns. If you have an inkling of a desire to use they them pronouns, that to me is an indication that, you know, I'm not going to tell you that you're trans. I'm not going to tell you that you are definitively non-binary. That's not for me to say, but just do it. You know, there's no punishment for experimenting. There's no law against trying out new pronouns, trying out a new gender identity, and seeing if it fits you better than the one you were assigned at birth, at least. Because all of these words, these are just words that human beings made up to describe feelings that they had, and they're not perfect. No, not a single word in the world perfectly describes the idea that it attempts to convey. So being non-binary, especially, is this strange nebulous thing because it's like a definition by exclusion. Non-binary by definition is like neither one nor the other end of the spectrum, and that leaves so much room for what a non-binary gender might look like. People watching this may already know that non-binary is both a specific identity and an umbrella term. I identify as non-binary, but there are genders like sort of underneath the umbrella of non-binary. You might be agender, which is like, it is literally a non-binary gender because it's not male or female, man or woman. But there's just so much room and so much nuance there that doesn't get captured in binary genders. I've expressed this before, but I really, truly, deeply believe that way more people than would ever admit are non-binary or genderqueer, at least. Although if you're genderqueer, you're still kind of non-binary because you're not locked into one of the two options that we get given at birth. But yeah, I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome today because I had just talked about a little bit about how, like, when I first was coming out as non-binary, I was struggling with doubt. And that's something that can be reasonably expected. If you are changing your outward identity, if you are changing the way that you express yourself and the way that you ask people to identify you, there's going to be doubt. It's a change. It's a dramatic shift in the way that you interact with the world and the world interacts with you. So there's going to be doubt, just because of that, the hugeness of that shift. But I wanted to tell a little bit of a story about imposter syndrome that I was dealing with recently. So like I said, I came out as non-binary a little over 2 years ago, August 2018, I think it was. And I feel like I had overcome a lot of that doubt, a lot of those concerns, a lot of the, like, am I not, like, should I really be using they them pronouns? I have pretty much gotten to the point where I'm like, it is second nature to me to be referred to as they or them. He, him sounds completely strange. And like, I know deep in my heart that I'm non-binary. But recently I was thinking about what kind of videos I want to start making for this channel, to share with you, to communicate things that I want to communicate. And something that I know is that whenever I talk about trans stuff, whenever I talk about being non-binary, people really appreciate it. People have really responded and told me like how much, like, I'm not trying to brag at all, but like, people really have appreciated the videos that I've made about being non-binary, about trans stuff. And but I was sort of like so it's like a no-brainer. Those are the videos that I should be making, because those are the videos that appeal to the community. But I was sort of rejecting that idea for a while, and I sort of like, it was like there was like a stick, like I was like stuck in my brain about making those kind of videos, and part of it was totally egotistical reasons. Like, obviously, I'm a non-binary person, I'm a trans person, but there's so much more to me than that, and I had always envisioned being this like great artist, this like unappreciated genius, all of this stuff that you fantasize about when you're growing up. And so like I wanted to do other videos. I wanted people to appreciate me for my art, for like all the things that I made, for all of these like specific aspects of my character that were not necessarily related to just my identity as a trans person. But that's very egotistical. That's not serving the community. But there's another reason. I was talking to my partner about this. I was telling them all of these things about like why I was sort of like didn't want to just like go for what I saw as like the low hanging fruit of making videos pertaining to trans issues and non-binary stuff. And I told them about like the egotistical side, but I was also saying like, but there's also this sort of like fear I have. There's like a really sort of deep like core of fear I have about making these videos, where I'm afraid that people won't recognize me as non-binary. People in the world will not accept me as a non-binary person, will not accept me as a trans person. They'll think I'm faking. They'll think I'm doing this just for the attention, just to capitalize on video, like knowing that people want to see trans people. And my partner said, that sounds a lot like imposter syndrome. And it set off a little connection in my brain. It's like, oh yeah, that's definitely imposter syndrome. Fearing not being accepted as a trans person, having this fear of being believed to be fake, even though I know deep in my heart that I'm non-binary. I still had that fear. And it's a really insidious thing. It creeps into your life. It creeps into your mind in ways that you can't always see and can't always predict. So that's part of why I wanted to talk about it today, is because it's not something that you can just like decide to be done with, this sort of doubt. And it's something that you can expect to confront again in the future, even after you've confronted it, even after you've overcome a part of it. And that's just because I think that a lot of that is because the world is constantly sending us anti-trans messages. Whether whoever you surround yourself with, hopefully loving people who appreciate you for who you are. There's no escape from the binary. The binary exists everywhere you look, and especially like for me growing up, like the internet was not a huge part of my life necessarily. Like we certainly like literally like Facebook became a thing when I was a senior in high school. So that's how old I am. And but yeah, like I didn't even know that trans people were a thing until college, until I was very old, comparatively to the resources that exist now. And every story that I read growing up, every TV show that I watched, every movie, all of these things tell you again and again and again that only two genders exist, men and women, and transness is not included in that subject matter whatsoever. Being non-binary is this, I think it's a very threatening thing for the order of the world, because the world operates very much in binaries. The Western world, Western ideology deals so strongly in binaries. It's like, are you good or are you bad? Are you right or are you wrong? Are you happy? Are you sad? All of these binaries infiltrate every aspect of our lives, and and like I was saying, like not just with gender, it's everywhere. And so the idea that you can be something that is outside of the binary, that you can exist as this other thing that is not commonly talked about or commonly accepted. It's difficult. It's difficult to truly deeply internalize throughout all of your being. And I know, people know that non-binary people exist. People can wrap their heads around it, I think. But wrapping your head around an idea is very different than internalizing it and being able to accept it on a very bodily level. And I think that that's like another misunderstanding, like another Western misconception of how knowledge works and how feelings work. We conceive of the mind as every single thought we have, every single thing you think, every single thing that you say comes from your mind, but it also comes from your body. It comes from like a very integrated consciousness that exists throughout your body. And accessing that deep level of knowledge and sort of excavating all the things that you learned, excavating all the things that we're constantly told, and replacing it with the understanding that things outside the binary can exist is a difficult task. So imposter syndrome comes and goes. I would say don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of not having all of the answers, of not knowing for sure if you're non-binary or not. Don't be afraid. It makes me so sad to think that there are people out there who like know in their hearts that they're not a man, they're not a woman, but they also don't know that they're non-binary, and maybe have this reluctance to start identifying that way for the fear of being called out, for the fear of being not accepted as a non-binary person. And yeah, it really makes me sad to think about that, because you just do it. Even if a month later you're like, you know what, I'm not non-binary, I made a mistake, I really thought that I was, maybe it's something else, who knows. Take that chance, take that risk, and see what it's like. One of the number one pieces of advice I give to people who are questioning or struggling with their gender identity is just experiment, try it out. There's no shame in changing your pronouns and then changing them again later. Like I said before, all of our relationships to gender are very fluid. Even if you're a cis person who identifies as a cis person your whole life, there are still going to be fluctuations in your relationship to that gender. So just like, really, just like, if you are like, I kind of don't want to be called he, him anymore, I kind of want to see what it's like if people use different pronouns. And for me, I went through a period where I asked people to use whatever pronouns they felt appropriate. And that felt like a baby step, a good sort of like dipping my toe in the water of expressing my gender queerness and asking people to recognize my gender queerness. but what happened, what I found that happened with that was people usually still used he, him for me. Even I told everybody, I told people to use whatever pronouns. I introduced myself and said use whatever pronouns. People would gravitate to he, him, and I think that was a really successful experiment for me, because when I realized that I actually didn't want people to use he, him at all, then it made it much easier for me to move on and just say, you know what, they, them only use they, them. My pronouns are they, them. That's it. So definitely recommend, like, just doing it. If you have to change it again, that's okay. I have a friend who changed their name, who completely changed their name. And after a few months, they were like, no, I'm changing it back. That was the wrong choice, and it's cool. And no one got mad at them. No one harassed them over it. And you know, if you're in that situation and people do harass you and people do make you feel bad for changing back, then, you know, frankly, reevaluate those relationships or talk to them and tell them how that makes you feel, because that's not an appropriate way to treat people. Sorry, let's see, Christopher. I jumped straight from thinking I was cis to thinking I was trans, and not even until recently even considered non-binary. Yeah, I think that's a really common thing as well for trans people. There was definitely a while where I thought I was a trans woman, and the story is that I woke up January 1, 2019, I think, the day after, like, New Year's Day, and I look over at my partner. The first thing I say is, I think I'm a trans woman. I think I'm a woman. And she looked back at me and she's like, no, I don't think so. And I'm not calling her out. I'm not saying that she was wrong for saying that. She was actually super, super right. I was just like over eager. I was like super ready to be like taking on the new year. You know what? Like, trans woman. But that's fine. You know, that's what I think. I think part of the process of uncovering your gender identity in a world where transness is not accepted by and large. Transness is still very much not accepted, and the world is organized against transness. I would say that just like imagining yourself as a different gender, just imagining yourself as like, well, if you were assigned male at birth, imagining just like, well, what if I am a woman? What if I'm a woman? And just like doing that sort of like thought experiment is a really good way of sort of like getting yourself out of that track, out of that assigned gender thought process, and that can definitely lead to getting closer to how you really feel like you should identify. It's such a process. Okay, Bread Senpai said, same, I tried to force myself to be a trans man. It was very toxic for me. So another example of sort of like going back and forth and like really experimenting. That's definitely, it's such a huge part of realizing the gender identity that suits you best. AC says, I've been going through a lot of imposter syndrome lately, and so much of what you're saying absolutely hits home. Thank you for sharing all of this. Of course, I'm so happy. I am so happy because I just like, there's so many other people like you, like me, who are dealing with imposter syndrome. And it's like, I you know, as many times as it can be said, it needs to be said that that's okay. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to not be sure. There is no moment of epiphany where you are just dead sure forever that you are whatever gender you think you are. And who knows? It's like, you know what? Like maybe 10 years from now, I'll be like, actually, I think I am a trans woman. that might be what happens. It might not happen. Who knows? Like, it's like literally the future. The future is unwritten, and our relationship to our gender is really fluid, and changes as we change. You know, life is not the static thing. That's such another binary, that we are plugged into. It's like, we have this idea of like, there's the before time, before we realized we were gender queer, gender fluid, whatever, and then there's the after time where we forever know what our gender is, and that's just not realistic. That's not how things work, and just sort of like uncoupling those binaries from the way that they're latched on in your brain is such a huge part of healing yourself, of healing from the constant messaging that the world gives us, that people like us don't exist, that people like us are faking it, or are I don't know. I don't even want to repeat some of the stuff that I've seen, that I've heard, but I know that you people probably know what I'm talking about and share the feeling. And it's just like, it does feel really awful. Like, I see, like, online, I see like a lot of trans misogyny, trans hate, people just like saying that we aren't real, that we don't exist. And it's like, it's really awful to see that, even with the strongest conviction in the world, that it's like, we do exist. It's like, sorry, like, period. Like, I'm here, like, I exist. We're here, we exist. It's like, you cannot argue with the reality of our existence, but people do. But people say that we don't exist. And just seeing that talk, just knowing that there are people out there who hate us so much, it's toxic. It's really damaging to our mental health, and really going through and sitting with whatever thoughts that you have in your brain, and uncoupling them, and just like dealing with them head on. Confronting your feelings is a really good way of healing yourself, and making yourself, just being able to let go of some of the baggage that we all carry with us. And I'll give you an example of that. I recently learned this technique called that was taught to me as shadow work, which is the process of like sitting like in a meditative setting or something, and confronting your fears, confronting the dark, shadowy parts of your consciousness, and just like sticking to them, and like listening to, like, what are you afraid of, and just like thinking, like, I fear this, and like going down the line. And weirdly, one of the first things that came up for me, and this was like literally 2 months ago, was like, what if I'm gay? And it's just like the funniest thing in the world to me that came up, because like, I have been out as bi for years. I am non-binary. So like, what if I'm gay is like such a weird, like, mental thing, but it's like something that I have worried about and have been afraid of for a really long time, because growing up, being in especially like in middle school, like, it was very much taught to me that being gay is the worst thing you could be. Being gay is like awful. And so it's like, there was like this deep fear that set in my heart when I was that young, of like, what if I'm gay? And I hadn't really dealt with it, but like going through, and it was like, it really, I felt lighter going through that and being able to deal with it. Even as silly as it was, and it was like silly in the moment. I laughed, and I was like, thought it was funny, but like sticking through and being like, well, what if I'm gay? Like, what if it's like, well, I kind of am gay, like, whatever, like, and like going through and just being, and like letting that feeling flow through your body and go out and leave you is a really helpful tool. I highly recommend it. And it's definitely that sort of like, that's something you can do also with dealing with imposter syndrome. Like if you are non-binary and you're like, well, what if I'm not non-binary? It's like, don't reject that feeling. Don't tell it to go away. Don't like hide it in the closet in your mind. Just like sit with it and be like, well, what if I'm non-binary? It's like, well, you know, no matter what, it's not really the end of the world. You're going to be okay. You're going to be fine. You can make it through this, and you'll probably be like, well, this is sort of like a weird like thought because I am non-binary. You know, like there's the part of you that has been like sort of yearning towards gender euphoria is gonna tell you, is gonna speak. You, all trans people have that inside them. All trans people have had to confront their gender in a way that probably 99% of cis people never really do. We live in a world that teaches us these ideas of what gender is so strongly. It's like women are this and men are this. And those are the only two options. And we get taught that so strongly. And for people like us, for non-binary people, it doesn't add up. It really doesn't, it doesn't jive with the way that we feel inside. And there's no way around that. And you can either process that and like work towards feeling out what your gender is, or you can deny that feeling, and that causes a lot of problems, and that will really just like lead to pain and sorrow. I just have to tell you right now, if you're having like questions in your mind, if you are a cis person and you're like, well, like maybe I'm not cis, like I don't know, like I don't feel like I perfectly fit into my gender, like I'm just gonna be real with you, like 90% of cis people don't feel that way. 90% of cis people never think for a second about whether or not their gender is accurate, whether their assigned gender is their actual gender. I'm sure lots of cis people, you know, do actually really go through this. They, you know, especially like meeting trans people and learning about trans people, cis people are like, probably like it comes up for them, you know, it's like, oh, am I a man? Am I a woman? But for them, it's like really quickly resolved. And for trans people, I think it's a lot harder because we really do have to unlearn so fucking much in order to like reveal our transness. It really is like shedding layer after layer of like all of these defense mechanisms that we've put on ourselves. Like so much of the unlearning that I personally have had to do have been taking away all of these learned behaviors that I threw together in order to survive in society, presenting as a man. I had to exist, like I you know, appeared to the world as a man for so long, because I was assigned male at birth, and I had to fit in or die. And so I learned all of these shitty, a lot of them are really toxic male behaviors because we live in a patriarchal society where men get to act like shit all the time, with very little consequences, if any. And yeah, so like excavating that, like revealing your transness is the labor that you do in order to expose your transness. And so like if you are struggling with your gender identity, if you were like really like, I don't know, like if you're going back and forth, then I do really recommend experimenting, like questioning, like asking your friends to use different pronouns for you. I mean, be safe about it. Obviously, like it's not always safe to be out as trans, but like long periods of questioning your gender are a pretty strong indicator that you might not be cis. Ryan said, our transness is so groundbreaking for society that we have to deal with so heavy ontological, epistemological questions about our own lives. That's super true. It's like that's another aspect of this, of being trans, that like folds into imposter syndrome. And that is just like, it takes a lot of work to be trans. It takes so much fucking work, excuse me, to be trans, because we're it's an uphill battle or swimming upstream, whatever. It's hard. And it does take, it takes a lot of like really deep soul searching that cis people don't have to do. They just don't. So yeah, and if you are experiencing like that kind of soul searching, you might be trans. Vico said, I remember in high school meeting AFAB non-binary people and being like, okay, but do I feel that and I'm cis? But I do feel that and I'm cis. And then years later, I was like, oh, never mind. And that's another aspect of it too. Is like, we convince ourselves that we're not trans. We're so inundated with the belief that of course we're cis, that we can even feel things like that, feel the same feelings that other trans people do, and not recognize that as us being trans. AC said, recently I've been like rehashing a lot of harassment I got from my professors in college, re gender, and how those have affected the way I relate to my identity and traumatized me. Like, yes, so much internal work. It really is, because there's the damage that other people put on you. And then I think for a lot of us, there's the damage that we put on ourselves. Like I definitely am that way. I definitely tend to like mentally self-harm, basically, for lack of a better word. And to reject. I spent a long time rejecting my queerness. I spent a long time being like, no, these feelings are fake, bullshit, go away, and just like, and hiding them in the dark. And I was miserable. It made me so fucking miserable to reject myself that way. And it's not easy. And that's something else that makes me sad. It's hard. It's a hard existence. It's not easy to be trans. And I really wish and long for a world when I talk to young trans kids who are just realizing their gender, it just makes me want to tear apart the world and rebuild it in a way that that they can live an easier life. It's really upsetting to think about, actually. Okay, One to the Infinity said, I first openly identified as non-binary when I was 14, made a Twitter account, now I'm 16, I'm going through the same thing of doubting everything. A lot of this really resonates with me, and I think a lot of it is internalized transphobia, yes, which I thought I would be over, but I harbor a lot more weird transphobic thoughts than I thought, yes. And I'm still working through it, but this video resonates with me a lot. Thank you so much for those. You're welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your experience. This is such a common experience for trans people, for trans people of any age. I think is such a deeply common experience. And of course, just because we're trans doesn't mean that we can't have internalized transphobia. That is something that is everywhere. Every single person has internalized transphobia, even if you're trans. And working through that and dealing with it is work. It all comes back to doing that work. And that sort of, I was telling a story earlier about how I was reluctant to make videos about being trans, to make videos about being non-binary, because I was afraid that people wouldn't really accept me as a non-binary person. They would look at me and think that's not a non-binary person. And that is internalized transphobia. That is me feeling like my appearance, for whatever reason, because I was assigned male at birth, because I have a certain bone structure or appearance or whatever, that people would still see me as a man. And that is transphobia. That is not how gender works. I am non-binary, and whatever I look like, I could look like any fucking person in the world and be non-binary. And same with you. You don't have to look a certain way to be non-binary. That is transphobia that we have all internalized, unfortunately, and that's something that we all have to work through. AC said, and then like to find a therapist who already shares a common language to work on this stuff with, nearly impossible. Yeah, dude. Sorry, I'm Californian. I just say dude. I retract it. Finding a therapist that is chill. Okay, cool. Finding a therapist that is like good regender is so difficult. I'm super lucky. I have a therapist that I would say is like above average, still not like, maybe if we're talking about like ABC grades, like maybe like a B plus B minus, like ranging depending on like how she, it varies. But the first therapist that I went to like last year, they did not even know about binary trans people. They were not even aware. And yeah, so I only went to them once, but finding a therapist in general, even if you were not trans, is like such a difficult, awful experience. But yeah, I just wish you the best of luck in finding someone, because it helps a lot. I've highly recommend going to therapy. It's a huge help. But yeah, it's just not easy to deal with that doubt, and just like it comes back. Don't ever tell yourself that you're done with it for good. We are constantly learning and unlearning. We are constantly taking in all of that anti-trans messaging that we see in the world. It's constantly being put into our brains. And even if we reject it right away, even if we're like, that's not true, that's bullshit, we're still seeing it. It still gets sucked into the vacuum that is our brain. We don't get to choose. What we keep and what we discard that easily. It's something that we have to process and take the time. So really just be gentle with yourself as you are going through this process of learning and unlearning and figuring out your gender. You are a human being, and you deserve to be loved. And it's not easy. Don't be hard on yourself. You can do it. That's something I believe really strongly, is that you are totally capable of coming to a better place, of understanding your identity better. And it just takes time, a lot of it just takes time. And I was talking about that sort of imposter syndrome that I was feeling recently, 2 years after I came out as non-binary. And yeah, it still caught me by surprise. It still was just this thing that like I had to deal with, but it definitely wasn't as severe or as difficult as some of the doubts that I was having when I was first coming out as trans. I used to really just like ruminate on whether or not I was trans. And it's like, okay, if you're spending that much time thinking, you might be trans. So yeah, I just really want to reach out to the people who are watching this video now and in the future. Like I am dead confident that there's at least one person who will watch this who is like unsure, undecided, doesn't know if they're non-binary or not. And I just have to tell you, just like it's okay. It's okay not to know. It's okay to live. It's okay to doubt. It's okay to question. It's okay to say you're non-binary and then like a year later decide that you're not. You don't have to have an answer. You never have to have an answer. It's okay. And you just like do what makes you feel best about yourself. Do what makes you feel closest to the way that you feel inside, the least amount of barrier between your heart and the world around you. Yes, Vico, gender is super fluid. It is. Our relationship to gender is fluid, even for cis people. Elijah said, thank you for sharing your story and using this platform to have these conversations. You're awesome. You're awesome. Thank you for saying that. I love compliments. I'm a Leo. Shower me with compliments and I will love you back. No, but seriously, I'm really happy to have this conversation. It's like, I feel like I could say this all day, every day, and it still wouldn't be enough. We like really, as trans people, we got to have each other's backs. We got to support each other and remind each other that it's okay. It's okay not to know. It's okay to live in that space where you don't have an answer. For me, like that's what being non-binary has changed my life. It has made all the difference in the world. I'm so much more able to see the nuances of the world and to understand that nothing exists in a binary. There is no on off. There is no light or dark. There is no good or evil. There are just things that exist that you could describe in relative terms. And that's a lot harder to say. It takes a lot longer. But that's the reality. And I'm super glad that the world in general is growing more welcoming of trans people. We are here and undeniably here. Whereas in the past, it was in the West, our existence was heavily erased. But non-binary people have always existed, and people who don't fit perfectly into whatever genders that exist in their society, because there are many societies that have multiple genders, like more than two. That's normal, you know? And like I was saying earlier, like all of these words that we use to describe gender, non-binary, gender fluid, agender, man, woman, whatever, they're just arbitrary labels that we have come up with as human beings to describe the way that we feel. They are not concrete. They are not perfect. They're totally imperfect. There's not a single word that has ever existed that perfectly describes the feeling or the idea that it has attempted to describe. Never. We are so much more complex than that. We are so much deeper than that, than a word could ever possibly describe. Like, you know, the idea, like, we contain multitudes, we contain infinities. And so, like, I guess that's all just to say, like, please be gentle with yourself. Please be gentle with others. It's not easy. And I hope that there are cis people watching this, because y'all need to know this too. Y'all need to not police our genders. Although obviously that goes for trans people as well. It's like, don't police other people. Don't tell them there's only one way to be non-binary. It's not true. And I think that for the most part, we all agree and know that. But yeah, I don't know. There's not much more to say. If you have doubts, that's totally normal. If you don't have doubts, that's cool, man. It's totally cool. Either way, you are who you are. And that fear that you won't be accepted, that people think that you are wrong, that's a fear. That's scary. It's a scary thing to deal with. It's a scary thing to think about, that you might not be accepted. But you're the only one who can determine your gender. You're the only one who can figure it out. And whatever it takes, however long it takes, you can do it, you know? And you should do it, because denying these feelings is not going to make them go away. If you have these like questions and feelings, they might be difficult. They might be really difficult to start dealing with. But they're going to keep coming back. You're never going to be free from those feelings unless you deal with them, unless you confront them head on. So please take care of yourself. Please, you know, be gentle with yourself. And yeah, there's no wrong way to figure out your gender. Yeah. All right. I think I'm going to end it there. Thank you for watching. I have links to some of my other videos in the description if you want to see. But yeah, thanks for watching. I'll be back next week, same time, 1 p.m. Take care. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this discussion. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I'll see you later. Have a good day. Bye.